My mom got up and left my baby shower the moment the gender reveal showed it was a girl. She said she'd only come back when I gave her a real grandchild. She'd invited 70 people to the country club, hired photographers, ordered custom decorations. This will be the event of the year, she kept saying when everyone finds out about my grandson. She was absolutely convinced the baby was a boy. She even bought blue decorations, just in case. Told all her church friends to get ready for a little man, and embroidered a blanket that said Junior. Jack and I didn't know the gender ourselves. We had the doctor write it down, seal it, and hand it straight to the baker. Eleanor tried to steam open that envelope twice before I caught her. "I just want to prepare properly," she said. "That's literally what the reveal is for," I reminded her. She decorated the country club in yellows and greens, but I'd already seen the box of blue streamers in her car, ready the second she got confirmation of her grandson. The shower started beautifully. Guests arrived, gifts stacked up, and my 2-year-old Lucy ran around in her little big sister dress. Eleanor kept scooping her up and telling her, "You'll have a brother to protect you. What if it's a sister?" Jack asked, "Be ridiculous," Eleanor said. I prayed for a boy, then came cake time. Eleanor shoved her way to the front, phone in hand, practically vibrating. "Everyone pay attention. This is history. The first grandson, Jack and I cut the cake together pink." Bright, obvious pink, the room cheered. Another girl, how lovely, sisters. But Eleanor froze, staring at that pink, feeling like it had betrayed her. "There's a mistake," she said. "Cut another piece." We did. "Still pink, the baker got it wrong." "No, Eleanor," I said quietly. "It's a girl." She put her phone down, grabbed her purse, and headed for the exit. "Mom, where are you going?" Jack called after her. "I need some air." "The party just started. We haven't even opened gifts." "I'm not feeling well, Mom." "Stop." She turned around. Everyone was watching her. "This is false advertising," she announced. "I planned this shower for my first real grandchild." "Not another girl," I said. "Lucy is your grandchild. This baby is your grandchild. You know what I mean. A legacy child, someone to carry on the family name. This," she pointed at the cake, "is just repetition." My grandmother stood up. "Eleanor, you're being absurd." "I'm being practical," she insisted. "2 girls, what's the point? They'll marry off. They become someone else's family. Boys stay. Boys matter, that's enough," Jack said. "If you're leaving, then go." "I will. Call me when there's something worth celebrating." And she walked out. The room went silent until my sister Amy said, loud enough for everyone, "Good riddance. More cake for the people who actually love this baby." After that, the party felt lighter, better. People shared stories about their sisters, about raising girls, about strong women they admired. Lucy ate so much pink cake her whole face turned sticky and rosy. Jack's Aunt Helen gave a speech about how Eleanor had apparently forgotten she herself came from a family of 3 girls. "Our mother loved us no matter what," she said. "Shame Eleanor can't do the same." Eleanor didn't call for a week. When she finally did, the first thing she asked was whether we'd considered trying again for a boy. "I'm still pregnant with this one," I reminded her. "I mean afterward. You're young, you can have more attempts." "Attempts? These are children, not lottery tickets, you know what I mean. Another chance at a boy. We're having 2 daughters. That's our family." "Well," she snapped, "that's Jack's failure. You're aware it's the father who determines gender, right?" "That's not failure, that's biology. It's disappointment," she said. "I'll never have a grandson. Then you'll never see your granddaughters." "Be dramatic. Not when you call them disappointments." She hung up and told the entire family I was keeping her grandchildren from her. Helen set everyone straight. She walked out of a baby shower because the cake was pink. What grandmother does that? 2 months later, we welcomed our daughter, Rose, perfect, healthy, soft pink. Everything Eleanor claimed wasn't worth celebrating. Eleanor sent a card. "No money, just, I am updating my will. Neither girl will be beneficiaries." That note sat on my counter for 2 days because I couldn't decide whether to toss it or bury it somewhere out of sight. Then my phone started exploding. First my mom, Octavia, furious and shaking, asking if the letter was real. She kept saying she had never seen anything so cruel. Then my grandmother Caroline called and immediately launched into calling Eleanor that ungrateful woman, which felt surreal coming from someone who'd known her for 30 years. By the next morning, more calls. Helen, Amy, cousins, people who were at the shower. Everyone wanted to know if the will message was actually true. I read Eleanor's words so many times they stopped sounding like English. Jack spent those days trying to reach his mother. I'd hear him in the other room, letting it ring and ring, leaving gentle voicemails begging her to talk. She never answered. On the 3rd day, her phone finally picked up. And it was his father, Sebastian. I was in the kitchen making lunch when I heard Jack's tone shift, tired one second, furious the next. Sebastian had called to say Eleanor was too upset to talk and needed more time to process her disappointment. Jack's face went bright red, and he hung up without even saying goodbye, something I had never seen him do to his father. He tossed his phone onto the couch and walked outside, standing in the yard with his hands on his head like he was trying to keep himself from falling apart. Meanwhile, Lucy kept asking where Grandma Eleanor had gone. She'd waddle up to me with her puzzled little face and ask why Gamma left the party so fast, why she didn't say goodbye when she was coming back. I tried telling her Grandma wasn't feeling well, that sometimes adults have to go home to rest. But Lucy, being a too smart 2-year-old, looked right at me and said very clearly, Gamma mad about baby sister, and my heart completely broke. Even a toddler saw it. She understood her grandmother left because the baby was a girl. I scooped her up and held her tight, trying to figure out something gentle and not completely dishonest to tell her. Jack came inside eventually and distracted her with a snack and cartoons. But that night, after she'd fallen asleep, he sat on the edge of our bed and cried. I'd never seen him look so defeated. A week after the shower, Eleanor finally called Jack. I was folding laundry when he answered, and even though he didn't put her on speaker, I could hear her. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask how we were. She went straight into lecturing him about genetic testing and IVF with gender selection. She had clearly researched it. She quoted statistics, talked about clinics, success rates, even procedure timelines. Jack let her ramble for maybe 2 minutes before cutting her off, telling her she sounded unhinged. Her reply was immediate and sharp. The family name dying out was the true insanity. He was failing his duty as the only son. We were being selfish by ignoring modern medical opportunities. Jack ended the call without another word and just stared at his phone like it had betrayed him. Over the next few days, I tried focusing on preparing for Rose, setting up the nursery, washing those tiny pink outfits, assembling furniture. But Eleanor's words kept replaying in my mind. The idea that my daughters were somehow less made me nauseous. I'd be folding onesies and suddenly hear her voice calling 2 girls redundant. Or I'd be tightening screws on the crib and remember real grandchild. Like Lucy wasn't real. Like Rose wouldn't be real either. Jack found me crying in the nursery more than once. He'd just hold me because what was there to say? His mother had made her opinion of our family painfully clear one afternoon. Helen called. Her voice was tight with anger as she told me Eleanor had started spinning stories at church, claiming I refused to try for a boy, that I was purposely ending the family line, that I had something against having sons. Helen said she'd already stepped in and corrected everyone, that she wouldn't let Eleanor twist the story to make herself the victim. I thanked her and hung up, but I felt worse than before. Now Eleanor wasn't just rejecting our girls. She was publicly campaigning against us. 2 days later, my sister Amy arrived with Chinese takeout and found me crying in the nursery again. She didn't ask anything, just set the food down and hugged me. She said Eleanor was finally revealing who she really was, and that it was better we knew before Rose arrived and could be hurt too. Amy reminded me Lucy was young enough not to remember much of this, and that we could protect both girls from Eleanor's toxicity if we made the right choices now. We ate noodles sitting on the nursery floor, surrounded by pink blankets and stuffed animals. And Amy kept making ridiculous suggestions about how to mess with Eleanor just to make me laugh. 2 weeks after the shower, Jack got an email from his mother, long, detailed, and titled, Moving Forward. I read it over his shoulder, feeling my blood pressure rise with each paragraph. Eleanor had written out her reasonable expectations for us to attempt for a boy within 2 years of Rose's birth. She included statistics about gender disappointment being a medical condition, attached links to 3 fertility clinics offering gender selection, complete with prices and success percentages. She even proposed a timeline, suggesting we begin when Rose reached 18 months. The entire message was formatted like a business plan, bullet points, steps, deadlines. Jack stared at the screen for a while, then started typing. His reply was short and cutting. He told her the obsession with male grandchildren was disturbing and sexist. He reminded her that she was a daughter, that her own mother had 3 girls, and asked if she thought her mother considered her worthless. He wrote that our family was complete with 2 daughters, that we weren't producing more kids to feed her legacy fantasies, and that she needed to ask herself why she valued boys over girls in the first place. He hit send before I could finish reading, then shut the laptop and walked away. Eleanor's response came less than an hour later, but she didn't send it to Jack. Instead, she called Sebastian in tears. And Sebastian immediately called Jack, asking what he'd said to hurt his mother so deeply. I could hear Sebastian's voice through the phone, pleading with Jack to apologize for the sake of peace, insisting Eleanor felt attacked and heartbroken. Jack's jaw tightened, and he said plainly that the apology needed to come from her, not to her. She was the one who walked out of a baby shower and threatened to cut her granddaughters out of her. Will Sebastian tried the "she's just disappointed" excuse again. Jack cut him off. Being disappointed doesn't give someone permission to be cruel. Being upset doesn't make rejecting children acceptable. Sebastian sighed and said he'd try talking to Eleanor. Jack told him not to bother unless the conversation involved accountability and an actual apology. When the call ended, Jack looked drained. Like standing up to his parents had used up everything he had 3 weeks past before my next prenatal appointment, and I spent that whole time trying not to think about Eleanor's demands or the will threat. At 7 months pregnant, I was supposed to be preparing for Rose, not dealing with my mother-in-law's fixation on boy grandchildren. The appointment started normally, measurements, questions, until the nurse took my blood pressure twice, then went to get the doctor. My doctor came in looking worried and said my blood pressure was higher than she wanted at this stage. She asked about stress, and at first I tried to brush it off, but then I just broke down. Right there on the exam table, sobbing in a paper gown, telling her everything. Eleanor walking out, the inheritance threat, the email about IVF and gender selection. My doctor listened and explained how emotional stress can affect pregnancy, how high blood pressure this late can lead to complications we need to avoid. She recommended monitoring at home and reducing stress as much as possible, which felt ridiculous when Eleanor kept escalating. I left scared and furious. Scared for Rose. Furious that Eleanor's behavior was literally impacting my health. 2 days later, Helen called and invited us over for a family meeting. She made it clear Eleanor wasn't welcome. She'd gathered Jack's aunts, uncles, and cousins to talk things through. Jack was hesitant, but I wanted to know if I was overreacting or if this really was as bad as it felt. We arrived that Saturday to a full house, everyone tense but united. Helen started by explaining why she'd called everyone together, how Eleanor's behavior at the shower and after had crossed serious lines. Then people began sharing their own stories about her, and I suddenly realized this wasn't new. Jack's uncle talked about her trying to take over his wedding planning, dictating venues and guest lists. An aunt shared that Eleanor had criticized her parenting for decades. A cousin said Eleanor refused to attend her college graduation because she didn't approve of her major. Every story painted the same picture: a woman who needed total control and lashed out when she didn't get it. Listening to everyone, I felt this strange blend of relief and sadness. Relief that I wasn't imagining things. Sadness knowing Jack had grown up thinking this was normal. Then one of Jack's cousins mentioned something that made the room go silent. His sister, years ago, had 3 daughters in a row. Eleanor had made nasty comments about wasted pregnancies, kept asking when they'd finally try for a boy, and grew more critical with each girl born. Eventually, the cousin's sister stopped bringing her daughters around because the rejection was obvious. Their parents cut off contact with Eleanor for 2 whole years over it. Jack's face went pale hearing this. He'd been too young to remember the details, only knew there'd been some tension. But now, listening to it laid out clearly, everything clicked. This wasn't new behavior. This was a long-standing pattern of valuing boys over girls. Jack's hands were shaking. He stepped outside and Helen followed. When they came back, Jack looked like he'd cried, but also stronger, more resolved than he had in weeks. He thanked everyone for speaking up and said it helped him see that protecting our daughters wasn't dramatic. It was necessary. The gathering ended around dinner time, and we drove home in silence, both processing everything we'd heard 3 weeks before my due date. I was in the nursery folding tiny clothes when the doorbell rang. Jack answered, and I heard Eleanor's voice in the hallway, bright, cheerful, acting like none of it had happened. I stayed where I was, one hand on my belly, listening as she told Jack she'd brought a gift for the baby. Through the doorway, I saw her holding a gift bag covered in blue ribbons, which already felt intentional. Jack took it, looked inside, and his face shifted from confused to furious. She'd given us a book on raising boys, along with a note about planning ahead and paying for a gender selection clinic. She stood there smiling like she'd done us a favor. Jack handed the bag back and told her quietly but firmly that she wasn't welcome in our home until she could love all her grandchildren. not just imaginary grandsons. Alina turned red, called us ungrateful, and stormed off, shouting that we'd regret this. Jack closed the door and just leaned against it, shaking. We held each other for a long time. That night he broke down in a way I'd never seen, grieving the mother he thought he knew and realizing he might never have truly known her at all. I cried with him, for our daughters, and for the relationship they were losing before it ever existed. The next morning, Lucy found her old big sister dress and insisted on wearing it. She spent the whole day cuddling her baby dolls, talking to my belly about how she'd play with Rose. Watching her pure excitement made Alina's rejection hurt even more. Lucy deserved a grandmother who celebrated her, not someone who wished she'd been born a boy. My grandmother, Caroline, called later, furious after Alina tried to get her to talk sense into us. Caroline shut her down immediately, telling her to look at her own misogyny instead of projecting it onto her granddaughters. She told me to focus on staying healthy and ignore Alina's nonsense. A couple days later, Helen updated us that Alina had been quietly uninvited from several family events. People had seen her walk out of the shower over pink cake and weren't buying her victim act. Even some of her church friends were distancing themselves after hearing about the gender selection gift. For once, the truth was finally catching up to her. Sebastian called Jack that evening, sounding worn out. He admitted he'd always known Alina had strong gender preferences, but thought she'd soften once the babies arrived. He said he'd been wrong to minimize it and apologized for not standing up to her sooner. When Jack asked why he stayed with someone who thought this way, Sebastian went quiet before admitting he'd been asking himself the same question. They talked for nearly an hour, and when the call ended, Jack looked exhausted but relieved, like a weight had lifted 3 days before my due date. Real contractions woke me at 2 a.m. Jack jumped up and started timing them, and within minutes we knew it was real labor. He called my mom and then his dad. Sebastian asked if they should come to the hospital, but Jack said only if Alina could behave, which Sebastian admitted she couldn't. My mom arrived to stay with Lucy, and Jack helped me into the car. We reached the hospital a little after 3 a.m., and I was already at 6 p.m. The nurses got me settled quickly. Jack held my hand through every contraction, worry written all over his face even as he kept telling me I was doing great. Rose arrived at 6:47 a.m. 7 pounds, 2 Oz, with a head full of dark hair and Lucy's tiny button nose. They placed her on my chest while she cried, and Jack cried too, staring at her like he'd never seen anything so perfect. Within hours, my mom, Caroline, Amy, and Helen all came to meet her, bringing flowers and filling the room with joy. No one mentioned Alina, but her absence hung in the air. Lucy came that afternoon wearing her big sister dress. She climbed onto the bed carefully and held Rose like she was made of glass. She stroked her tiny hand, whispered promises, and even sang a little song she'd made up. Jack filmed it while wiping tears from his face. She stayed for about an hour before my mom took her home. Over the next 2 days, the room filled with flowers, balloons, cards, and gifts from friends, neighbors, and extended family. But nothing came from Alina. No message, no call, no acknowledgement. On the second day, Sebastian texted congratulations and said Rose was beautiful. But Jack immediately realized the picture he sent was just one Jack had posted online. He hadn't come to the hospital. He hadn't met his granddaughter. He was just trying to avoid Alina's anger. Watching Jack's face fall as he understood that hurt worse than his mother's silence, Jack texted a simple thank you back to his dad. But I could tell the reused social media photo hurt him. We brought Rose home after 3 days and spent the next few sleepless days adjusting as a family of 4. Lucy wanted to help with everything, constantly bringing Rose her stuffed animals. On the 3rd day home, the doorbell rang. Jack came back holding a large envelope from a law firm. My stomach dropped. He opened it and went pale. It was a notice stating that Alina had officially removed Lucy and Rose from her will. Everything would now go to Jack's cousin's sons. Both our daughters were listed by name under removed heirs. Jack immediately called her. She answered, sounding almost cheerful, talking about real heirs and the family name. Jack's voice kept rising until he finally shouted that she was punishing 2 innocent little girls for being born female. Alina calmly replied that if we ever had a son, she'd reconsider. Jack cut her off, told her she was dead to us, and hung up before she could say anything else. I heard his phone hit the wall a second later. I came out with Rose, and we just sat together in silence. That night, after the girls were asleep, we talked everything through at the kitchen table. I told him I didn't care about her money. I only cared about protecting our daughters from someone who saw them as disappointments. Jack agreed and said he'd rather have nothing than let his mother poison their self-worth. We decided there would be no contact unless Alina changed completely and apologized. The next day, Amy came over and found me crying. I told her about the letter and the phone call, and she turned bright red with anger. She kept pacing, furious that anyone could do this to their own grandchildren. I asked her not to confront Alina, and she sat beside me, saying Alina was only revealing who she really was, and someday she'd regret throwing away these girls. The following morning, Helen called. She was livid, saying Sebastian told her everything, and that even for Alina, this crossed a line no one in the family could defend. Helen told us she was done making excuses for her sister, and was organizing the extended family to send a collective letter calling out Alina's behavior. I said she didn't have to, but she insisted. 5 people had already agreed. After we hung up, Jack sat on the floor beside me while I changed Rose. He looked exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. 2 weeks after Rose was born, the hormones hit hard. I'd cry while feeding her or feel sudden sadness while playing with Lucy. Alina's comments kept replaying in my mind. At my postpartum checkup, I broke down. The doctor said it sounded like postpartum anxiety, gave me medication, and referred me to a therapist. I went to the appointment alone. The therapist listened as I explained everything from the baby shower to the will change. She said some grandparents get so fixated on the fantasy of a perfect grandchild that they reject the real ones, and that Alina's behavior was about her own issues, not my girl's worth. Hearing that from a neutral person helped. Around this time, Lucy started asking why Grandma Alina didn't visit like Grandma Octavia. With guidance from the therapist, Jack and I told her that sometimes adults make choices that hurt others, but it wasn't her or Rose's fault. They were loved and perfect just as they were. A month after Rose's birth, Helen called to say the family letter was done. 15 relatives had signed it. It listed Alina's behavior, from walking out of the shower to rewriting her will, and said that unless she got help and made real amends, she wouldn't be welcome at family events. Jack read it twice before signing 3 days later. Alina responded with a long, dramatic group email claiming she was the real victim. She accused me of manipulating Jack and said she had every right to be honest about her disappointment. She even framed her gender obsession as traditional values. An hour later, Helen replied to everyone with screenshots of Alina's own texts about real grandchildren and statements from people who had witnessed the baby shower incident. She attached dates and details, laying out Alina's behavior in a clear timeline.